Pleasant good afternoon. John Verlin once again with On-Demand Advertising Solutions Digital Marketing Update. This past week, I saw a really good movie, documentary on Netflix that really ties into an email I got this week from a woman named Connie, Kansas City, Missouri, and she basically wanted to know if I could maybe give some advice to her son, who seems very determined to start a new business, seems to think I might have some great insights. I'm teasing a little bit, but Connie, thank you for the email. And apparently he's like hell-bent on being successful. And I think it's great that she's concerned, about how he approaches everything. But I guess what I want to do is talk about today life lessons that every business owner ought to know. And this prompted me, her email, and then the show I happened to watch this week. I want to tell you a little bit about it. But the reason I wanted to do this podcast after reading her email is that applying basic life lessons to your business can help you make you wiser in the decisions you make and enhance your well-being for future successes. Now, we hear about life balance, life-work balance, and all this. You don't hear a whole lot about well-being. You hear about reaching the top, being this super successful, but you don't hear about their life, the lifestyle. What toll has that taken on their health, on their relatives, or their friends, or their relationships? So there's some basic things I want to talk about today that I think are, if you have a business, they're reminders. If you're starting a business, it's good to know up front. You need to think through things to decide, is this what we really want to do? Is it the way we want to do it? Because too many times you look back in hindsight and say, boy, if I could start over, I really wish I would have known about such and such. Well, I want to just kind of set a little bit of a path here to kind of get you thinking. Okay, realize, and there was an article a week or two ago in USA Today about businesses, startups. 20% will make it in the first year. 50% will make it for 5 years, and only 30% 10 years. So the odds are you're going to fail. Now, I don't want to sound negative, but I want to be realistic here. We all go in with an idea and we get excited about it. We do some research. We maybe look into financing. But there's two things surveys have shown and studies, two things that cause businesses to fail. The first is not enough sales. Don't have the customers. The idea wasn't what we thought it was. It didn't take off as fast as we thought. And the second follows up with that, and that's cash flow, financing. Sales may start to take off, but guess what? People don't always pay, and they don't always pay on time. So you need something to keep you afloat. And it's really tempting to dip into retirement savings or mortgage your house or get financing from friends or family. But there's something as far as life lessons that I want to go into about this. Now, there's no success without risk, and your goal is to understand this to minimize the risks. There's always going to be risks, but minimizing them is key. Because I guarantee you, Warren Buffett, when he makes a decision, he does his research and he takes whatever steps to minimize what he's out for and what kind of risks he's going to face. And some of these lessons are going to go just the opposite of popular advice, but in doing so may guarantee a rewarding spiritual and life balance in your entrepreneurial experience. And these are critical because what good is it to gain the whole world and end up losing it all, or destroying your mental health or your spiritual life or your family life? What value is that? How's your well-being with that? So the first lesson I want to mention is, regardless of how you earn income, save at least 10% in some sort of vehicle on a regular basis. It could be an index mutual fund, a savings account, and this will ensure some form of retirement income when you can't work. This is a do not touch fund. I learned this in my 20s from a book called Common Sense by Art Williams, who founded A.O. Williams Company, later became Primerica. It was like the 13 steps to financial independence. And the second follow-up to that was to have a budget and track expenses. Those two things. Save 10% of whatever it is you make, whether you work at a restaurant, wash cars, you're a doctor, whatever you do, 10%. Save it. Don't touch it. Over the long haul, it will grow. Worst case, it'll be there. Whether it grows or not, like the past 5 or 6 years with no interest, so what? It's there to tap when you need it. Okay? Also, track expenses and have a budget. Those three things. Save 10% of what you make, form a budget, I'm talking daily living expenses, and track them. That's for your well-being financially. Too many people don't do this until they're in their 60s or 50s and they realize, oh my gosh, I can't work anymore. And then what? So, starting out. The second thing I want to talk about is listening to customers' concerns. This won't or will not only help produce a better resolution experience, but prevent future hardships down the road. Now, there was a documentary on Netflix this past week I watched, and I encourage you to watch it. It's a lot of life lessons, and it's called Dirty Money. And there was an episode in there about a man who was a race car driver that developed payday loan businesses named Scott Tucker. Well, as I watched this, I realized I remember this in the newspapers in Kansas City, and Scott lived in Overland Park, not far from me. And he started a payday loan business, had a bunch of them, eventually got it on the internet and really made a ton of money. Started race car driving, became well known in the race car circuit. They estimated he was worth $400 million from this until he got negative, a class action lawsuit of customers, 1.2 million, I think, or 1.5 million customers who took out $500 payday loans. These were typically lower income. They were paycheck to paycheck. If they missed out, they'd lose their car, perhaps. So they would borrow $500, fill out an online application. The fine print they may not have actually read very well, because in it basically said, you're going to be paying, interest rates. The problem was, how much were those interest rates? How were they applied? How was your payments applied towards your principal? If you were a day late, how did that affect it? We've all heard this kind of story, but in the long haul, he ended up charging 400% interest. Just kept jacking up the rates. And people would be paying, I've paid $130 against my $500 loan, and I find out I owe $950, and my loan hadn't even been applied to. Wait, what? And they'd call up yelling at him, angry at customer service people, threatening to come down to wherever they were. They didn't know where they were. He also partnered with a couple Native American tribes, one in Nebraska, one in Oklahoma, to sort of be, I don't want to say cover for him, because they're sovereign nations. I guess federal laws couldn't actually do anything, or state laws couldn't. At any rate, the sad part of this whole story was it just happened in this month of January, last month. He ended up getting 16 years in prison, a $1.2 billion fine, lost his race cars, lost everything. His brother jumped from a 6-story building and killed himself. And he ended up with nothing, losing, I would imagine, $400 million in everything. Now, as I say, what are life lessons all about? He was the pinnacle of success. But don't you think along the way somewhere, and as I was watching this, I thought of this, if I had customers calling up, yelling at me, angry with me, if you're not proactive on that, particularly today with social media, it'll spread like wildfire. The last thing I want to do is go to bed at night for my well-being knowing somebody is threatening me because they're mad at me, or threatening to sue my business for a reason. And it's just like, okay, so Where are we in all this? Why do we do these things? And this is why this is important to understand these things, because we don't always know where our attitudes and or our behaviors are going to take us in this. And the third point I want to make about all this is pride, arrogance, and greed will almost always lead to hardship, failure, and misery. You may start out with a great idea, be all excited. As you succeed, if you succeed, you may start getting a little boastful, a little confident, too confident. We've seen this everywhere in the media, among celebrities, politicians, you name it. And they start doing behaviors that are not only perhaps immoral, above the law, and then they could end up come crashing down. Well, why would they be worth so much money and then suddenly go bankrupt and lose their relatives, their families, whatever? What causes that? Well, this is why the attitudes are so critical of pride, arrogance, and greed. To check yourself, remember where you came from, and keep these on your forehead in front of you every day, because they can lead to a downfall and they can sneak up on you before you realize it. Be wary of loaning or borrowing money from friends and family. The relationships will change at that point. I know it's easy to say, hey, my uncle's going to loan me some money, my dad's going to give me this, give me that. Be really wary of that, because if that relationship changes for good or for bad, and if you make a lot of money, you would assume, oh, this is great, I paid my loan back, everybody's happy with me. Well, what if they want more? What if a third cousin comes out of nowhere because they're jealous of you? There's all sorts of behavioral things we have to consider, and not only ourselves and how we treat our employees, our customers, but our family members. To think through these things when you make decisions, because only you can change those decisions and direct your course. For example, and I don't want to sound preachy here, but this is really important, and you've probably never heard this. I mean, meaning in business-related context. In a disagreement, the Apostle Paul in the Bible, in a letter he wrote to the Corinthian church, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 7 and 8, says this: "You are already defeated because you have lawsuits against each other. Why don't you accept the fact that you have been wronged? Why don't you accept that you have been cheated? Why not suffer loss? Why do you have to win?" That's me saying that. Now, what he was talking about, well, these were Christians in the Corinthian church suing one another, and he's trying to tell them, wait a minute, you guys, you're better than this. You accepted Jesus, his teachings, his example, or you're way above this, to forgive one another and love one another, not to sue each other. And you're doing this in front of the heathens or the non-believers. What kind of an example is that? Is what he's saying, basically. But he brings up the question that you've probably never read in a business book or heard anybody say, except somebody that loves you and maybe sets you down and say, why not be cheated and walk away from this? Wow. I mean, that's pretty strong stuff. Well, why would you walk away from it? Well, we may not always be able to control events, but our reaction to them says a lot about our beliefs and our character. And that can go a long way in our well-being and future transactions. Because so many times you make decisions, we make decisions, we don't know the outcomes, and we think, I'm going to sue this person, or I'm going to do this or do that, and it drags on and on and on, and could end up costing you a lot more than you anticipated. So these are some life lessons I want you to kind of grab onto and think about when you make decisions with your business, because they have long-lasting consequences. Always keep the golden rule front and center in all of your dealings, which is do unto others as you would have them do to you. And there's a thing called the law of the harvest. You will sow what you reap, you will reap what you sow. If you sow tomatoes, you're not going to get peas in return. You will reap more than you sow. You sow 10 seeds, you're going to get 200. And you reap longer or farther out on down the road than you sow. So you sow today, maybe a year from now, you get the harvest and you get the benefit of those crops. Well, this law of the harvest is kind of a cause and effect they talk about in physics. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. How we treat one another, how we treat our customers is planting seeds, good or bad, and it's going to multiply. And many times it's going to happen on down the road. This is why understanding these things and exercising good judgment and wisdom, getting counsel, advice, is so critical when you're starting out. Because you want to make good decisions that will have good, lasting effects on down the road. And not shoot from the hip and not think through some of these things, particularly when it comes to other people and relationships. Because with customers, this is huge. But it's not just the customers, it's your everyday relatives, relationships, friends, and family. Well, I hope, Connie, I've given a little bit of food for thought here. I want to thank you for the email. I've been a little long today, but I really wanted to talk about this because that Dirty Money episode about Scott Tucker, it's a sad story, a lot of lessons in it. What is success? At what price is success? Something we all need to think about and consider in building our businesses. John Verlin12 at AT&T.net is my email. Love to hear from you. Thank you again, Connie. OnDemandAdvertisingSolutions.com is the website. We'll talk to you again soon.